Welcome to this week's episode of the Sports Curious Podcast. Welcome to our Wednesday Wisdom edition of the podcast. I'm your host, Amy Buchan and Scott, and today we are so excited to be talking about the WNBA season. Now, there has been so much hype during the college basketball season leading up into the WNBA season, and here we are. We've made it. It is time for the season, and joining me to talk about it is my favorite WNBA expert, who is very biased of Las Vegas Aces fans, just so you know if you're listening. Scott. Scott is my co-host, my co-founder. Scott, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here as one half of the top-rated brother-sister sports podcast out there.
Well, I'm pretty sure we in theory could be the only sibling podcast for sports out there. But I'm going to take it. I will take it.
Yeah.
I did some research last week, and it was like we're in the top. I think what was I say, like 6% of podcasts in the world. And I'm going to take that as a bonus and
Yes.
excitement. And so we're going to go with that. I'm not going to say that there's probably thousands of podcasts that aren't even active right now anymore, but we're going to go with it.
Let's go with it.
Let's go with it.
And I noticed your background's a little bit different this podcast than usual.
Yes, I have a beautiful cityscape of the city of Chicago. I am in town to host and MC the Rockney Gala, which it's their 65th year, I believe. And it raises money for the Notre Dame Club of Chicago scholarships for kids in the Chicago area to go to Notre Dame. And it's such a great thing. And it ties in perfectly because part of the Rockney Gala is to interview someone who is involved in sports from Notre Dame. And last year, I had a chance to interview Niela Ivey, who is the head coach of the women's basketball team at Notre Dame. She's a phenomenal human, and it was such an honor. But she's also a former WNBA player. So full circle that I'm here today to do this gala tonight, and that we're recording our WNBA podcast.
Perfect timing. And I think what we see in research, she actually played for the Fever.
She did. She played for Caitlin Clark's team, the Indiana Fever, on one of the teams she played for. So pretty exciting. And speaking of the season starting, you're getting ready to hop on a plane yourself and head to South Carolina?
Yes, right after this podcast, I'm flying to South Carolina. Las Vegas Aces, back-to-back WNBA champions, are playing the Puerto Rican national team at the University of South Carolina, where A'ja Wilson went to school, has a statue. She's a legend there, so it'll be exciting to see.
That'll be awesome.
The game.
That'll be really
yes.
fun.
So it'll be exciting to be amongst everyone's there for a common cause to see A'ja and the Aces.
Can't wait to see the photos of Christmas card photos you're going to be taking there. Have you been to South Carolina?
A lot of good photos as usual.
Have you been to South Carolina before?
I have not. It's not the easiest place to get to in Columbia. I had to triple check I wasn't flying to the country, Columbia.
Excuse me. I think there's a couple Columbias in in the country. So yeah, that's probably besides the actual country.
Yes. So it's a little tricky. So stay tuned.
Stay tuned. Don't take your passport just in case.
You never know.
Well, let's dive into this season for the WNBA. What's the one thing that is the top of mind when it comes to the WNBA season this year?
For me, it's the momentum that's been building for years with viewership and attendance since they've actually put it on TV and made it easy to see. And all of that momentum is kind of spilling over now with this new rookie class coming in, which has brought it to the forefront.
I mean, and we obviously talk about Caitlin Clark, but it's Angel Reese, who we saw at the Met Gala, and she's in Chicago. And so we have Angel Reese. We have why am I blanking on the name from Stanford? I'm drawing a blank.
Cameron Brink from LA.
Thank you. Yes. And so we've got this great class. Camila Cardoso is she? Yep.
She's in Chicago as well.
Yep.
So they got Angel and Camila, and Camila's in the Netflix documentary coming out with Caitlin Clark and Kiki Rice, who's still in UCLA.
So if you haven't watched it already, Omaha Productions, which is Peyton Manning's company, produced a docuseries around the 2023-2024 women's college basketball season, that record-breaking season that we all tuned into. So that's out right now. So get ready to watch that to get excited for the WNBA season. Now, one cool thing that's been in the news and I really think is awesome is the WNBA has been really interesting. In 2020, they had a new collective bargaining agreement which put in maternity policies, adoption, support for adoption, and fertility, but travel. They changed their travel. So previously, these women were traveling. They were traveling on planes just like you and I. That collective bargaining agreement gave them premium economy seats and their own hotel rooms. And this season, because we've solved with Brittany Griner, there have been a lot of requests for charter flights, private flights, essentially, for the safety of the athletes. Right? I know Brittany had a couple of incidents last year in airports, and so they've added in charter flights this year, which is a game changer. It used to be against the rules, even if your team could afford it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the New York Liberty actually got in trouble for trying to charter flights for their teams. Previously, before this, you could only charter flights for playoffs and Commissioner's Cup games. So they were flying Southwest or, their Seaboarding group. But it was just announced that they're just going to start phasing in charters for this season through Delta primarily, which is massive for travel, back-to-backs. It's just going to improve the overall product, the quality of the product immensely.
Well, right. They're going to arrive rested. They're not going to be like you and I, delayed at an airport and some of those things that,
Yes.
I mean, there's still obviously opportunities for weather delay, but they're not going to be sitting in an airport just like you and I trying to figure out how to get the next flight when they have a mechanical error or something like that. I think it'll be such a game changer, and it's such a great quality of basketball. It's funny. I actually was, now that your Instagram feed changes to how you follow stuff. I'm getting all this women's basketball stuff and all these women's sports things now in our feed at last night's game. And I saw this one going around, and it was a tweet from someone that said, "The little boy in my gym class just took a deep three and said, 'I'm going Caitlin Clark on you.'" And I was like, that is awesome. Like, that is so cool. And it's so fun to see the quality of game that we have. Well, Caitlin Clark, this year in the WNBA or the NBA All-Star game, they had a 3-point shootout with Sabrina Ionescu and Steph Curry. Do you think Caitlin Clark will be against Steph Curry this year?
I mean, that was just a monumental event they had anyways, just to have Sabrina and Steph go at it. I've heard rumors that Sabrina and Caitlin will team up, maybe go against Steph and somebody else, maybe Clay if he's still his teammate. So I think that'll be something moving forward that will definitely keep going.
That would be really cool. It's just neat to see. So I guess where do I want to really take this? Let's talk a little bit about the WNBA. Right, they're owned by the NBA. I read a stat that you sent over that typically the NBA is pocketing about $10 billion in revenue. The WNBA about 200 million. They raised about 75 million last year in capital to push out more marketing, global expansion. So just talk to me a little bit about the business of the WNBA when it comes to all things.
Yeah, so the NBA owns 50% of the league, and then 50% of the other 50% is owned by the owners of the teams. And I saw a good quote that put it in perspective. The NBA has been around 78 years. This will be the 28th season of the WNBA. So, I mean, when you put it in that terms, they're really still a new league that's still trying to fight for revenue and things like chartered flights. If you remember, NBA didn't have chartered flights for a very long time. They were flying commercial and flying public as well. So it's just if you build it, they will come. So it's kind of just going to take a while.
So in theory, you're even saying that the WNBA could surpass the NBA in popularity. I mean, they're in such an infancy stage at this point. They have 50 more years, more or less, to go to be to an NBA level.
Exactly. So, yeah, the NBA 28 years in was definitely not on TV. I don't even think games were live. You were watching replays from the night before or days before. So to put it in that perspective, I think, well, everyone wants instant gratification. Everyone got upset about the salaries. You have to put it in that perspective.
That's actually a really great perspective. So speaking of salaries, talk to me a little about that. Everyone was up in arms about Caitlin Clark making, was it $75,000 the first year?
Roughly 78.
78,
Yeah.
right? And so,
Mhm.
these are obviously why these players are going overseas, like Brittany Griner was over to Russia, and a lot of players are doing
Mhm.
Australia, et cetera, to make money in the off season. But it's on track, right? And it's set. So
Yes.
talk to me a little bit about salaries, because we also have then Jackie Young, who's making $250,000 a year from your aces.
Yes. So I mean, the draft salaries were slotted where you got drafted. Caitlin Clark steals, I think, 4 years at 78,000, and then after that, you can renegotiate. But for now, there's 21 players that with salaries of at least 200,000, which is way up from previous years. So I mean, it's getting there. Obviously, it's not the Wembanyama, who's a rookie who made, I don't know, 50. He's going to make $50 million in his rookie deal. I mean, it's going to take time. Everyone wants it, immediately. And luckily for these women, they're off the court. They're so visible and important that they're getting these crazy sponsorship deals now,
Yeah.
which will kind of offset not making millions of dollars.
Yeah, it's incredible what's happening in the background. It's been really
Hmm.
fun to watch some of this happen, because it's not just Caitlin Clark. It's all of these
Yes.
athletes who are reaping the benefits of, she's
Hmm.
basically, rising tides raise all ships, right? So it's really coming full circle, and it's really cool to see something happening this off season, or this season, is the Olympics. Now, professional basketball players can play in the Olympics, unlike
Hmm.
some other sports. What will we see? How will they handle that? Because the Olympics runs right in the middle of the WNBA season.
It does. It's a very unique season they're going to have with, a majority of the league heading to Paris on their national teams. So the league's actually taking a break from July 18th to August 14th
Oh, wow.
completely.
That's crazy.
That way all the players can go, compete. The majority, I mean, Team USA is, all WNBA players, so they're likely going to be there the entire time,
Yeah.
winning a gold medal. So league will shut down for a full month.
That is amazing.
And I think it'll be incredible to see it'll almost be like, that was in the 1992 Dream Team with like MJ and Magic.
Mhm.
I think the Team USA women's basketball is going to be on that level this year internationally.
It's cool. It's really cool to see, and I look at it too, like,
Hmm.
it's kind of like the US women's national team, right? They
Yes.
were light years ahead of other countries for
Hmm.
their talent. They came in and dominated, and the rest of the world has now caught up, obviously, as we saw in the last World Cup. But it's so cool to
Yes.
see that these women are gonna roll in, and it continues to infiltrate and build their brand, right? I mean, we've talked about the reason we know so much about Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark
Hmm.
is because they are required by the NBA draft, WNBA draft rules, to stay in school. And so they have a chance to create a brand versus
Yes.
departing after their first year. And so, it's really cool to see that this will continue to build their international brand when you think about it, right? I mean, that is phenomenal.
Absolutely. Yeah. And like you said, it took 20 to 30 years for other countries to catch up in soccer. And I think we're on that precipice now with women's basketball that Team USA is going to force other countries to, really invest and, develop talent for these women. And it's just going to be an exciting time.
It's gonna be really exciting. Now talk to me, because typically within the season they do this Commissioner's Cup, and you talked about that when it
Yes.
came to the charter flights.
Mhm.
What talk to me about the Commissioner's Cup? I know it's a little confusing. The NBA's also put in an in-season tournament now too, similar to like they do in soccer in Europe. So talk to me about the Commissioner's
Yes.
Cup and what that is.
In season tournament, so Commissioner's Cup, sorry, I got a little confused there, is it's not necessarily an in season tournament like the NBA had. So it's like, I think it's 10 designated games throughout this beginning of the season to where, you're playing Commissioner's Cup games, which go towards Commissioner's Cup standings. And then the two best teams from each conference will play in the Commissioner's Cup championship
Okay,
towards the
so
end.
they have
Yes.
basically one. They're big games, probably big rivalry games, I'm
Mhm.
assuming, that are part of this Commissioner's Cup, and then they will
Yes.
have the 2 that are at the top will have 1 extra game this season for that sort of Commissioner's Cup championship.
Yes, and I can't remember the exact number, but there's a very generous cash prize for winning the Commissioner's Cup.
Yeah, I do remember it was pretty significant, and I could probably look it up while we talk. Um, it's cool to see. It's neat to be
Mm-hmm.
get those excited where they're on Prime Video, where we're looking at ABC, ESPN. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
these games, as you mentioned, are available, where that wasn't the case before. I remember you probably still remember like texting you one day watching sports. This was probably 2 or 3 years ago, not that long ago,
Mm-hmm.
and they used a WNBA highlight to start off sports. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is monumental. I've never seen them start a sports center with a women's sporting event.
Absolutely, and just to be visible, to make it easy access for people to see it is the biggest hurdle that they've had to overcome. And I think we're getting there with the amount of TV games on TV that you're saying, with multiple options from ESPN to Amazon to Ion TV, which I don't know if you have Ion TV.
Do I?
I found out last year I did, so I was able to watch a lot of games on there as well. I think they have like Friday nights on Ion or something.
That's amazing. Now, let's wrap us with a couple other things that have just come up.
Mhm.
Um, expansion teams. Yeah, the league announced earlier, a couple maybe a month ago or so, that Golden State will get a WNBA team and they'll start playing in
Mhm.
2025. But we've just realized that Toronto's getting a team too.
Yes, I mean WNBA has been looking at expanding for quite a few years, and I think they've done the smart thing in slow playing it and not rushing to add new teams in fact quickly as possible to mess with revenue and things like that. So we have Golden State, who will play at the same arena as the Golden State Warriors, coming in 2025. And I mean, just before this podcast, we found out Toronto's getting a team. So I think that likely had to do with the charter flights being available now,
Probably
because it would be very challenging to get a team into
through immigration
Canada.
every single time.
Yes,
Oh my gosh, what a mess that would
yes.
be.
I think they had to wait for that to come through completely.
That's
And
interesting.
Toronto's a huge basketball market. I mean, the Raptors are.
Mhm.
I mean, they're playing tons of fans. People are outside watching games, so it'll be huge for the league
It's really
to get into Canada.
it's really cool. And um someone we won't, and I'm going to give us a total left-hand turn, but someone we won't see
Mhm.
on the court this year is Candace Parker. Candace Parker has been a fixture in
Mhm.
the WNBA, probably the best WNBA player we've had. She has just taken a job as the president of Adidas Women's Basketball, but she has hung up her sneakers and will not
Mhm.
be playing this season.
I mean, she walked so players like Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese could run. She had quite possibly the most remarkable 16-year career of all time, with multiple MVPs, multiple championships, multiple Defensive Player of the Years, gold medals. So for her to kind of leave the game at this point to where it's gotten to reach such a popularity is kind of impressive. And I think maybe she felt comfortable that it was in a good place.
Right. Well, and one thing that's also incredible is she's a mother. She raised her
Mhm.
daughter throughout her career. This is, she's done what so many women are doing in an everyday scenario, and
Mhm.
she's done that. She's excelled, and she's integral. We talked about this in our Mother's Day podcast, and getting daycare at the ACES facility, and things like that, where these women are making an impact in a much broader scale than just the numbers on the court. And I think that is a really cool thing to see that they are still making an impact and driving change within the league as it is.
And she'll be on TV throughout the NBA, and she'll be involved in basketball still with Adidas, so she's not going anywhere.
It's cool. Is there anything you want to share with us before we wrap up this podcast?
Can we talk CBA real quick?
Yeah, let's do
I
it.
think that's a big deal. The last CBA was negotiated in 2020 when the league wasn't necessarily quite in this financial and popularity that it is now. And it goes through 2027, but they can renegotiate after this year.
Okay.
So they will absolutely be renegotiating for bigger revenue share and things like that. So this year's massive for the league.
It's awesome. It's awesome to see what they will do. And I did just see that Disney Plus is streaming Caitlin Clark's
Mhm.
debut game. You can catch the games as they launch and as they start on Tuesday, May 14th. And
Yes.
it'll be an incredible season. Of course, stay tuned with us at lastnightsgame.com and follow us on social where we'll be sharing all of those things. Thanks, Scott, for joining me.
Thank you. Go Aces, go. Back.